Wow, that was like magic. Welcome everyone to the 60th Annual Delta Exhibition. This is a special night for the Arkansas Arts Center, and it is every year because this is an evening when we celebrate the artists in this area, Arkansas artists in our surrounding states. And it's always a wonderful opportunity to see what's being made out there right now, and to get a snapshot or peek in over the shoulder of the artists working in our region. So I know internally we always love seeing kind of what comes in and then what gets selected by the juror that year. So something that we've been doing the last couple of years is asking all of the Delta artists who are here tonight in the audience to please stand up so we can applaud your work. Congratulations, each and every one of you. It was quite a task, I know, to narrow all of the entries down to the artists selected to be in the show, which you will see tonight. I want to just mention a couple of things that are new this year in the Delta exhibition. One is beacon technology. So beacon technology, if you're not familiar with it, is an app that you can download on your phone, and when you go to enter the exhibition, you'll see how to do that. And what it allows you to do is, as you walk around the exhibition, there are little beacons set up near works of art, and it will automatically upload information onto your phone that is information about the artist bios, artist statements. There are also videos by some of the artists throughout the exhibition. So there are lots of other ways to get a deeper appreciation of what the artists are created and what they're doing now. So please take advantage of all of those opportunities to explore more of the art. There are a couple of thank yous this evening. So our exhibitions wouldn't be possible without a lot of generous donors. Our board and our foundation, who are great supporters of this institution, allow us to bring you the programming that you enjoy throughout the year. This particular exhibition is sponsored by Isabel and John Ed Anthony, the Brown Foundation of Houston, Mrs. Lizanne Rockefeller, Terry and Chuck Irwin, Friday Eldridge and Clark, the AAC Contemporaries, which is a young affiliate group of the Art Center, East Harding Construction, and Barbara House. The Grand Award is supported by the John William Lynn Endowment Fund, and the exhibition overall is supported by the Andre Simon Memorial Trust. So I want to thank each and every one of our donors and sponsors for making this evening possible. So this year, we did something a little bit different. We had 6 jurors for this exhibition, and I know that Brian and I, our chief curator, who's directly to my left, had many conversations about the pluses and minuses of having 3 jurors trying to decide and come to a consensus on which works were going to be in the show. We would either have an exhibition of 2 works, or we would have about 1,000. So it seemed like an idea that could go terribly wrong, but in actuality turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful idea. And you'll see the results of that in the exhibition. And so that gave us the opportunity to, instead of having a single lecturer talk about or the juror talk about why they made the selections that they made, we were able to have this panel discussion with 2 of the 3 jurors and, of course, our own chief curator as moderator. So one of the jurors could not be with us tonight. She's ill, and that is Les Christensen, who is director of the Bradbury Art Museum at Arkansas State University. But we do have here this evening on my far left, your far right, Shea Hembrey, who is an American conceptual artist. He's an advocate for artwork that marries intellectual rigor, technical mastery, and heart and soul. Hembrey earned his Master of Fine Arts degree from Cornell University, and in 2011 he received national attention with the release of Seek, which is a biennial which contained artwork by 100 artists. So typical of a biennial, you have many artists who submit work, and it gets juried, and you have an exhibition. What was unique about this is that all 100 of the artists were invented by Shea Hembrey, and he created all of the artwork as each individual artist. So that same year, he delivered a TED Talk entitled How I Became 100 Artists, which has since been viewed 1.5 million times. He lives and works in Hickory Grove, Arkansas. Brian Young, who is in the middle, earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in art history from the University of Michigan and his Master of Arts degree in art history from The Ohio State University. And since August 2016, he has served as the director of the Baum Gallery at the University of Central Arkansas, where he's also a lecturer in the Department of Art. Prior to joining the Baum Gallery, he worked as a curator at several institutions, including, many of you know, right here at the Arkansas Art Center. So give a warm welcome to our two jurors and also our chief curator, Brian Lang, who will act as the moderator for this conversation.
Welcome, everyone. To set the stage, I want to share with you the opening remarks from the catalog that appeared at the first Delta exhibition, written by William or Bill Stedman, the director. And he said, in launching this exhibition, I hoped our efforts would stir interest among artists, collectors, and museums throughout the country, and the many visitors here and elsewhere. If we have made mistakes, and I am certain that we have, it is to be hoped that with future exhibitions we will be able to correct these and improve upon the original idea. I feel deep interest and concern for the Delta Art Annual's success and continuity and its service to the artists in the Delta region. And certainly with our celebrating 60 years today, I think Bill Stedman and this community can be proud of the rich history and legacy that the Delta provides. To put the exhibition into a little bit more further context before we move on to the questions, the panelists, or the jurors, viewed 1,424 entries, which, in going back through all 60 years programs, I think is the record number of submissions. Those were by 618 artists. Out of that, they narrowed it down to the 52 works that you will see in a little bit by 46 artists, over 10 states, 28 of whom are Arkansans. So I think you had a Herculean task ahead of you and met it quite well. So what was it like to be a Delta juror?
You can go ahead. After you. One is I have a deep relationship and love for this place, so it was both flattering and daunting to consider that many works. But I really wanted to make sure more than anything that we made a show that the Arkansas Art Center could be proud of. They could walk in and they could feel like it was a good slice of contemporary artwork done in this region. So I took that to task, and any other considerations, I let them kind of just fall away.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting the show would be so different if it was just one of us, Jerry. So I think that was, I expected us to be on the same page more, I think, especially knowing less quite well, and we weren't. So that was really interesting. I think we all had valid opinions. It was just, I thought initially we would be on the same page more.
Yeah.
So that was a surprise. Maybe it took a little longer to fix, but not too much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One other consideration that was odd for me, and I'm sure you share some of this, is that there were artists that I knew I was going to know, right? So literally, I knew I was going to see the work of maybe David Balin and Warren Griswold. And how do you evaluate those artists that you know? And the way that I took that was to just compare them to themselves to see if they're growing as artists, and maybe compare them to other artists in the same media, so that I wanted to make sure that I thought the work was still strong. And then, but again, I only have 1/3 of the vote, so none of us could push anybody into the show. And that was a little comforting, and that helped. And then when these artists that we did know got in, we knew that it was collective, and that helped relieve some of the known bias that I knew that we had, and I know that you know that we had, if that makes sense.
Certainly. Shea, anything else to add to there?
Yeah, and especially with you and Les are so much more familiar with the artists in the regions, working with them through exhibitions, so I didn't have quite as much bias. I didn't, no. It wasn't going to feel the same for me, I think. Yeah.
Right.
And how did you resolve those differing opinions? Did they just kind of work themselves out, or?
We did a numeric scale. We basically just said grade them from 1 to 5, and let's be obvious, all the 15s got in, and all the 3s were left out. And then we got to, what was the number, 199?
Yeah, after we did the 5s, we had like a pool of 199, which was much more than I thought I think we all thought it would be. So I think I suggested, why don't we pick our top 20 each, and then we lobby from there about which we're most passionate about.
Yeah.
And then I think after that, it was just like 5 more were added. So it wasn't, it was.
Yeah. And I think we also felt a certain camaraderie in the fact that we had a lot of overlap of our top 20. And where the decisions got a little difficult was where maybe one artist had 3 pieces in, and we said, we're going to select 2 of the 3. We had to arrive on which ones those would be. So,
But we each had artists, too, that wouldn't have gotten in the show had it just been your show or just Les's show. So I think that's an advantage to having 3 jurors.
yeah, I love that. I love that concept that it wasn't just one person's outlook, but that we kind of shared that.
That's a good segue. Brian, you served as a juror on a Delta back in 1999. How has the Delta changed since the last time you served as a juror?
The best way I can answer that is to talk about what I was curious about. I was curious as to whether or not the Delta would still have this really strong regional quality with a strong tentacles to place and to people because of the internet, because of these different social media movements that are rising up. And the answer is, it didn't change as much as I thought it was going to change. If I can just select one person that I think embodies what the Delta is about, it's Tim Hersley, right? So he's this person who has this great technical skill in photography, but he's still going and he's looking over his back shoulder and he's photographing a place in Pine Bluff. And that's the Delta. That's what this show is about. It's about the combination of skill and a sense of belonging to a place rather than looking up subjects in the internet and trying to delve into new media. That's just one example. I could keep going on.
And Shea, you created your own biennial. How did that prepare you for being a juror in the Delta?
Yeah, working in that way made me appreciate work that I would normally not do, because sometimes I would work completely opposite of how I would work. So it really makes you embrace art in a more broad way. But I made 106 artists in 2 years, and then I wanted to pick 100. And the 6 that I cut out, when I looked at them, it was all my own work. And are closest to my own work, and it just didn't document as well. I tend to go for really subtle colors or monotone, and you have to see it in person. It tends to be quiet, and it just doesn't document well, and it got cut out. So I was trying to be mindful of that. Like sometimes work would seem really quiet, and I would try to spend more time with it, because there is work that didn't get in because it wasn't documented well, or they maybe needed to add details, or it just wasn't photographed well. So it really matters. Everyone should always include details. If it's large work, include a person looking at it, so it's really fast for scale. And it doesn't get taught in art school or often taught until you've done it for years and years and years, but the documentation really, really matters.
I want to share another juror statement from 1986, Grace Gluick, who was an art critic. And she said, "I was touched to find how concerned many artists were about the importance of regional exhibitions. Do they matter, they wondered, and do they really make a difference in furthering an artist's work? My answer to both questions is an unqualified yes. Every artist's work needs to be seen and judged in context with that of his peers, and for art that does not have the easy visibility provided by a large urban scene such as New York or Los Angeles, the regional exhibition is a wonderful answer. There it hangs for the public to see, a public that might include, besides neighbors and friends, out-of-town critics, curators, dealers, and others. The work of many artists seen in New York museum and gallery exhibitions has first been exposed in local exhibitions." So is that a sentiment that each of you shares?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a treat of getting to do this, to see the slice of a regionalism. And it wasn't provincial as I thought it would be. But what really struck me was, I would say 3/4 of the work was nature, really either nature-based or focused on nature. And I wouldn't have guessed that much, but it makes total sense given where we are. So that was, for me, that was exciting because it's an important part of my own work.
So you need to turn around, but we chose a few works that kind of emerged out of some themes, and this first one is on abstraction. So are there any of the works here that you might wish to expound upon?
You want to talk about the one on the upper left? Yeah.
This guy, is he here? He's a Missouri artist, I think a professor in Missouri. If I understand this piece, what it comes out of is, I think it's from a series where he pulls images from art magazines and from the internet and from, not Twitter, Instagram, what's popular and trending in the arts right now. And he pulls them together and makes composites of them, just tons of them digitally, and then goes back later and looks at them and picks the ones that are appealing and then carefully recreates it. In this case, it's tapestry and porcelain. So I think this is a really interesting way to work with how popular art's being digested. The top work is, I think, a Fayetteville professor's. A lot of his work is, one of the pieces that didn't get in but was submitted was a painting similar to this with I think an amp plugged into it, a guitar amp, I think.
And the work in the upper right is by Robin Horn, who does wood-based objects that look like they're assembled, but they're actually kind of cut away. And so she finds that tension between these forms that look like they're just always just kind of in motion in a way. And of course, I know the work of Robin Horn, and so there is a bias, but that doesn't mean that you vote to leave a work out because of familiarity, but you reconsider it with a new, hopefully a renewed sense of, or some more objectivity, if that even makes sense. I hope it does, but and just weigh it as much as it should be weighed. And the work of the trains is by Ben Crane, and I don't know if Ben's here, but I did a show of his work almost 20 years ago, and I didn't know that was Ben Crane when I saw it, because the show that we did of his work was of his work of Cuba. In this case, it's so much different, but it spoke to me and apparently spoke to my colleagues as well.
Yeah, in each delta, there's always a rich diversity of media that's represented. Did you want equal representation, or were you evaluating on the strongest work?
I think at the very end, when we had those last 5, I know I was like, okay, there's some gaps. What can we pull in, like, to tell the story better that we left out? The bottom photograph is by an Oxford,
Really West.
Yeah, an Oxford, Mississippi photographer, and that I grew up. That's at Calico Rock, and I grew up camping up there. But I remember when I first saw that image, I gasped because it just took me back to those childhoods of camping up on the river and how the fog would come in. And which I was like, okay, that's going to be this sentimental, I'm going to fight for this piece. But it was one of those pieces because the composition is so interesting, and then it makes me think of ukiyo-e, the Japanese, the floating world. It brought a lot together, and I didn't know her work, so it was lovely. This is a Conway professor, right? I'm horrible with names, so I'm not going to try to butcher them. And her practice is really interesting because she uses a lot of plants from her garden to make paper. That's another really great way of working with nature that you wouldn't maybe get from initial viewing.
So you take the sense of space, and it has this claustrophobic but also open, this energy. So it's quintessentially Delta. It's both sophisticated and then references back to nostalgia. I love that tension. But of course, I'm in Conway, so we talk about bias again, but so.
Now with Melissa Calvert-Smith's work, the upper left, that's a video piece, and it's one of the few video pieces in my recent memory, or at least the 6 years that I've been working with the Delta, that we have had video submissions and then were accepted in. There might have been one previously, but how do you see video today in the art world?
I know Les was really, if you don't go to the museum at the Bradbury Museum in ASU, you should a lot because she shows world-class video always, projections always. And she was really after it. And I think there were only maybe even 2 or 3 video submissions to even pull from. Yeah. No, it's vital. And time-based practices aren't going away, so it's important to.
UCA just hired it's going to hire its second graphic designer, right? So everyone's looking to the future. There's this renaissance of art buildings going up in the state, and these buildings aren't being created with painting studios. They're being created so they can teach video, graphics, sound, time-based. That's the way it's going, and I don't think there's any turning back. We'll see more and more entries of that.
Yeah. Well, every single, like you go in at Wingate here at UALR, every single room has a dedicated projector so that as you teach, you can be showing digital image or time-based work, which is something so nice to go into a drawing studio and see that those projectors are there. Yeah.
Actually, there are 2 exhibitions currently, one in Boston and one in Chicago, that explore video art, but the challenge for curators and conservators moving forward is how do you preserve these videos that are dependent on one particular type of technology. So, and then lastly, let's talk about portraiture.
That was surprising too. We commented, there was a lot of portraiture. We kept commenting on a lot of, that, I think, if more than anything, we were hardest on the portraiture because there was so much of high quality this time, yeah.
So a lot of good portrait artists, painters were excluded. And that was the hardest part of the jurying process, right? Was that we couldn't just make it a photorealist portrait show, but the ones that got in have probably been in before and have a lot of recognition. Donna Pinkley did a great series where she took gelatin silver prints of couples of mixed backgrounds, mixed race, non-heterosexual, and then she inscribed them with comments that were made to the actual couples. And by the way, they're not kind. So they're posed and they're somewhat formal, and then they're also really kind of biting about society. And that's the kind of work, again, if I were to repeat myself, and I fear I will in about 2 seconds, that she's a great photographer. She understands the medium. She has the process where she goes into the dark room, but then her work speaks to contemporary issues. And she was doing this before Me Too, before Black Lives Matter, before a lot of other social media movements, and I found that to be really powerful.
There's 2 to kind of tell that story of what that practice is, because that was hard. Sometimes you really wanted to show multiple, because sometimes a practice does need multiple images for a viewer to get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of powerful work in this exhibition. Art is intended to prompt a dialogue and start conversations. So certainly visitors to the Delta will see that.
And also with the work of A.J. Smith, which is on your right side, he takes, he's pretty traditional portrait, but he blows up the scale. And when you blow up scale, you have a lot more room for error. And so that's a little bit courageous, and I really found myself drawn to that work as I have in the past. I know his work, I know AJ, but I think that kind of risk, if you can reward it when possible, that feels pretty good too.
And personally, this has been a rewarding experience because, as I said, I've been here only 6 years, so I did not know any of these artists really prior to my coming here. And for those who have consistently gotten into the Delta, or at least twice or more times over the last 6 years, it's been really rewarding for me to see how they have developed as an artist and continuing to push themselves, because really that's only how you get better, whether it's being an artist or curator or what, is taking those risks. So I just want to close, if I can, before we move on to announce the awards, because I know that's why everyone's really here, is to share yet another quote from Hilton Kramer, who was an art critic. And he said, "It is the variety indeed that makes this year's exhibition," talking about the 25th Delta at the time, but certainly it's applicable today in 60 years. It's what makes this year's exhibition entirely representative of what is happening in contemporary art. And it is this variety, too, that forces us, juror and spectator alike, to look closely at what artists do, rather than at the labels that are sometimes attached to them. So I think those are still well-spoken words. So without further ado, let's begin to get to the awards. And we will start with the first honorable mention, which goes to Aaron Calvert for his Always Facing South Bear. Is Aaron here? I don't know if you want to stand up. Okay. The next honorable mention goes to Tim Hersley. And then the third honorable mention goes to James Matthews for his eviction quilt. Is James here? And I know I forgot to ask Tim to stand up. I know he's here. So, okay. So, moving on to the Contemporaries Award.
This is a prize for us.
I know. Well,
Ray Allen Parker for Post Punt. And I know Ray is here. Can you stand? Or? Okay. Oh, there you are. Well done. Now, for the top three, the first Delta Award goes to Lewis Watts. I know his mom, Lynette, is in the audience. So, Lynette, do you want to stand? Or there you are. Okay. Homegrown boy. The second Delta Award, Anais Dasse. I know Anais is here. There she is. And for the grand finale, the grand award goes to... Wait for it.
Commercial break.
Lisa Kranichfeld.
somebody thought we got that right.
Where's Lisa? She's somewhere here. I know she is. So, oh, they're right there. Okay. Gosh, these lights are blinding. So with that being said, the exhibition is now open. Thank you all for coming. Please enjoy the show. I think the jurors have done an exceptional job this year. It only gets better. So.
That flew by.